Kristy thought she had her future made. She graduated from college debt-free, hooray, and started out with an amazing career as a computer engineer. Kristy quickly learned that her dream life was actually kind of a nightmare, and that's when she found FI. Kristy wanted freedom, which she got when she retired at age 31. I cannot wait to share with you how she did it and show you how you can recreate her success. Kristy, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Mindy.
So, Kristy, you discovered FI after working for a little bit and discovering that that wasn't actually what you wanted to do for the rest of your life. How long after you discovered the concept of financial independence did it take you to actually retire?
It was about 3 years. I was shocked that it was 3 years because I was thinking that it was going to take at least 5 to 10 years. You know, it sounds great in concept. And I read the blog, Mr. Money Mustache, and I was thinking like, okay, logically, I think this should work. But when I actually started to implement it, it went much faster. It kind of turned into a snowball, completely blew away all my expectations. And I got to FI 3 years after I discovered it.
Wow. Okay. Did you have a financial independence number?
At the time, we were living in Toronto, which is one of the most expensive cities in Canada. So we were living on around $40,000 a year for the two of us as a couple. So that was kind of like the ballpark number that I was using. And I was thinking that maybe I could even move to like a cheaper town, small town, after I quit my job because I didn't need to be in a big city anymore. So it was generally around 30 to 40,000 a year is what I was estimating. And then the 4% rule multiplied by 25, I was thinking that we would need $1 million to retire.
So once you discovered the concept of financial independence, how much did you have saved up? Because 3 years is like as fast as I have ever heard.
Originally, I was not going towards the FI goal. I didn't even know what that was. I was trying to power save towards buying a house. So at the time we had $500,000 saved towards buying a house because that was the goal. Like that was the dream. Everybody in Toronto wanted to buy a house. It was basically the only thing that I really had going on in terms of like financial goals. It's like, this is my goal to buy a house and there's no other financial goal that's worth having. So I just threw every single penny I had towards down payment to buy a house. Back then, I think the average single family home was almost $1 million at the time. So that's why it was such a big nest egg that we had. And it actually helped propel me towards FI a lot faster, but that was not my intention initially.
Okay. And what was your yearly income at the beginning of your FI journey? And how did it scale up towards the end of your FI journey?
Initially, when we first started working, graduating from computer engineering, because I had some work experience, I had done some internships. We started out around $50,000 a year annual salary. And then eventually, by the end of the 9 years after I reached FI, I was close to six figures. And then the savings rate, we started initially a little bit under 50% savings rate. And then by the end of the 9 years, when we reached FI, we were at close to 75% savings rate.
Okay. Somebody who isn't necessarily familiar with financial independence will hear this 50% savings rate bumping up to 75% savings rate and think, oh my goodness, she's living no life. She's got no fun. Mm-hmm. Everything is rice and beans and peanut butter and jelly. And this is like the worst thing ever. Did you feel like you were giving anything up during this time of extreme savings?
I mean, we did go on 2 vacations a year. That was like non-negotiable. We went to like, yeah. So for me, like travel is my number one priority. It's true that I didn't have a car. Like a lot of my friends are like, how can you not have a car? I'm like, I can just use auto share. But everybody else was like, okay, well, you have to have a car living in a big city. And then people were also spending a lot of money just like buying, going out to fancy dinners and things like that. And we did cook a lot and we brought food to work. But for me, it didn't really feel like deprivation because it was going towards my priorities, which was travel. That may not be other people's priorities, but for me, like that was number one. And I think if you got the top 3 categories pretty much handled, it doesn't really matter that I'm spending like a bunch of money on vacation just once or twice a year because I got like the housing part down, the food part down, and the transportation part. Not having a car saved me at least $10,000 a year because I was just taking the subway to work and it only took me about half an hour. Sometimes I would even walk to work, which kind of like kills 2 birds with one stone because now I don't have to go to the gym and I'm actually like, because I'm exercising and I don't have to pay for a car to drive to work. And then I think one of the biggest things was not buying a house right off the bat. We ended up living in the top floor of a townhouse, and it was a 1-bedroom apartment that we rented for way below market value at $800 a month. Yeah, it was insane. I think at the time, the market value for a place like that was like $1,200. So we were getting a really good deal. And my landlord says, I am not a dollars and cents kind of person. And I'm like, well, fantastic, because I am extremely a dollar and cents kind of person. So we're going to get along great. So getting those 3 aspects correct, the housing, the food, and the transportation made a huge difference. So even though we went on like fancy vacations twice a year, I did not feel like it was deprivation at all because I always had the vacations to look forward to.
Okay, so we've established that you have your core 3 expenses dialed in. But FI has this stigma of cutting out expenses, cutting out extra stuff. What are your yearly expenses now that you've been retired for a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've been retired for nearly 10 years now. We first became FI in 2014, and then we went and started traveling the world in 2015. So back then, I thought that traveling the world was going to be super expensive because my experience of traveling back then was vacation packages, because that's what you do when you're working. You can only leave on a Saturday, and you've got to come back on a Sunday, and you don't have time to think and plan. So the most easiest thing is just to buy a vacation package. So I had estimated that our couple expenses for traveling the world was going to be somewhere around $75,000 to $100,000. What ended up actually happening when I started traveling the world and then went to other places besides, the usual London, Paris, New York, like I actually went to like Singapore, I went to like Malaysia, I went to like Thailand, I went to Greece, places that are a little bit more off the beaten path. I found out that when you average the cost down from expensive places like UK and then average out with Thailand, we actually only spent $40,000 for the first year traveling the world, which made me realize, why would I move back to an expensive metropolitan city where everyone's just rushing to go to work when I can just travel the world continuously on $40,000 and split my time between expensive and inexpensive places? So between 2015 to basically pretty much the beginning of the pandemic, 2020, in which we had to stop traveling and then come back to help our family with some medical emergencies, we ended up during that time spending approximately $40,000 to $43,000 a year consistently over those 5 years of travel. Our expenses still didn't go up very much at all during the pandemic. It actually went down again because everything was so cheap from the perspective of Airbnbs. And then most recently, last year, we actually had a baby. So, and then a lot of people were telling us like, oh my God, your expenses are going to double. Everything's going to be really expensive. And yes, for sure, like your expenses does go up when you have a child. But what we found is that the advantage of being financially independent is that you don't need childcare, which is one of the most expensive costs when it comes to having a child. So then our expenses didn't really go up that much either. I'm estimating for the first year of raising our son to be less than $50,000 a year.
I totally believe you that 1 year is going to be less than $50,000. And that's like not just him, that's you and your husband and the baby.
Yeah, together.
Yeah. So essentially your expenses went up by about $10,000. Approximately.
Yeah, probably less than that because I'm also a little bit more luxury driven compared to before. Because now I'm like, okay, like now I'm like already 40 years old. So I'm like, okay, I'll stay in like some nicer places when I travel compared to before. I'm not going to stay in like I'm like more flash packer as time goes on. So yes, part of it is also the baby. Part of it is also me being slightly more bougie than I was before.
Okay. So, there are people who say that kids are going to cost too much and you can't possibly be financially independent when you have kids. Or if you were financially independent and then you have a kid, then you have to go back to work. And no, you don't. Here's Kristy telling you don't have to. And she's right. Did you factor into your spending having a family?
Nope, definitely not. I was very much on the fence for the longest time whether I wanted to have kids or not. So yeah, definitely did not factor that in at all. But I was very comforted by the fact that I was reading other FI blogs about having kids and also just talking to you. I remember there was one conversation we had where you were talking about how your kids wanted American Girl dolls because the neighbors had them. And you're like, this is completely unnecessary. And just listening to other people, other parents say that a lot of the things that you have to have, like you must give your kids the best or whatever. Like I just kind of knew that was kind of a scam. So that gave me some peace of mind that even if I didn't budget for having kids, that it was not going to financially ruin me and make me crawl back to my boss to beg for my job back.
I love that. What are you investing in?
Back when we were trying to become FI, we were more conservative. So we were more at a 60-40 split. So 60 equities and then 40 fixed income. Now that we are over time, as our portfolio has grown, we're more like risk on. So we're more at like 75% equities and 25% fixed income. But we mostly invest in ETFs. And we do index investing because for me, having grown up with a childhood in poverty, like at one point my family was living on 44 cents a day in China. I don't like to do investments that are super risky. I don't buy into the whole go big or go home and you gotta like spend money to make money, like that kind of concept. I'd rather have it easy, straightforward, safe, and passive. So passive index investing really speaks to me, especially now that I have a kid. I'm so happy I don't have to do any kind of like active investing. Passive investing is the way to go for me. And it's really worked out very well for us.
Let's talk about net worth. There are so many people who have questions. Will the 4% rule really work? I'm sure you've seen the debate. Is it 4%? It's only 3.5. Yeah. I'm going to do 3.2. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But you've been retired for 10 years.
For sure.
How does your net worth look now versus 10 years ago after having been spending for a decade?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So when we start traveling the world in 2015 and we were budgeting $40,000 a year, our net worth was $1 million. And so over time, there have been some passion projects that have come in. Like when we started writing the blog, I was just doing it for fun initially, just to prove to people that you don't have to follow the script in life and that's the only way to live. And then that ended up taking off, which I wasn't expecting. And then a editor from Penguin asked us if we wanted to write a book. And then there was like some speaking engagements that I ended up doing. Just like passion projects end up happening when you are retired, and then you end up doing something you like to do for free, and then you end up being good at it and then making money. So what ended up happening was we started making money, but we also wanted to keep the FI experiment pure so that other people can see, even if they don't earn a single cent, it's still the 4% rule works and that they can live on the initial amount of money that they saved. So we actually separated the money that we had originally saved for retirement and any money that we earned from passion income after retirement into a separate portfolio. So we have portfolio A, which is the original amount, and then portfolio B, which is like earnings after retirement. And then we only withdraw from portfolio A just to show you that we are actually still living off the money that we initially retired with. And then the portfolio B, like passion income, is just extra bonus money that we were not expecting. And that's for like donations or like extraneous stuff, like treating family out for, things that you don't really have to do, but it's just like a nice to have. So the 1 million, even though we have been withdrawing 4% every year, is currently 1.5 million. And the amount that we earned after retirement is 600,000. And so combined, we have a net worth of 2.1 million. And that's 10 years after retiring and then still withdrawing from the portfolio 40,000 each year.
Okay, so Kristy, what advice would you give to somebody who is just discovering financial independence and the concept of it and wants to pursue it?
I would say be very open to the idea of geographic arbitrage or location arbitrage. And the reason why I say that is prior to the pandemic, people thought that geographic arbitrage was this like fringe movement, like, oh, these digital nomads, yeah, they're just going to go out into the world and then start their own businesses and then later on run out of money and then come crawling back for a job. And like nobody really wants to do that. But then after the pandemic, because so many jobs became remote, people who thought that they could never become location independent became location independent. Like I know several of my friends that were like, oh, I could never work from home. Like my boss would never let me. But then as a result of the pandemic, they're only allowed to work from home. And now their job has completely become remote. So you can take advantage by growing the gap between your earnings and your spending not just you don't even have to leave the country. You can just move to a different part of the country that is less expensive, but then you're earning the same salary. And all of a sudden that gets you to FI so much faster. Take advantage of location independence, because you don't really have to, you're not really making, I mean, you are making a big change in terms of like lifestyle change, but you're not really cutting back that much. You're just moving to another location. And then not only are you banking the difference between how much you're spending and how much you're earning, your FI number is much smaller, because your FI number, like your let's say your New York FI number or your LA FI number is very different from your Texas FI number. Right? Like it's like, it really makes a huge difference of where you're going to be living, or your Thailand FI number. Like you could be like, maybe you're, 30 years from FI if you are going to be New York FI, but you decide to retire in Thailand instead. And all of a sudden you're like 5 years from FI. It's magical, the geographic arbitrage concept. It's just people were not quite in tune with it before the pandemic, but now it's no longer fringe and it's become more mainstream. So take advantage.
Yeah, I love that. I have a friend who moved to Portugal, I believe before the pandemic. And she said, I ran my numbers living in Denver and they were, I still had 9 years to go. I ran my numbers living in Portugal and I'm already financially independent. So she moved there. She's able to work from home, and she works for herself, but her clients don't care when she does the work. I'm asleep and she's working. Who cares?
There you go. Yeah.
I get it in the morning when she said I was going to have it. That's all that matters. So there's a lot of opportunities there. I absolutely love that. Kristy, thank you so much for your time today. It's always a great time talking to you. Where can our audience find you? Okay, so you can find me at my blog, www.millennial-revolution.com. And you can also, I've also written a book called Quit Like a Millionaire, and then you can find that anywhere on Amazon or anywhere where books are sold. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Yes, definitely reach out. Kristy has all the time in the world now. She doesn't have a job.
All the time, except also no time at the same time.
Exactly. All right. If you like this video, don't forget to click the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more inspiring fire stories just like Kristy's. This is Mindy Jensen signing off.